I have to be honest. When I first saw the topic for today, I almost put it back in the pile.
I can see why.
I just felt like I know this story.
Yeah.
I mean, we all think we know this story. You see the headlines, you see the memes, you file it away in your brain under "Bad Man Does Terrible Things," and you just move on.
It's a natural reaction. It's almost a defense mechanism, really.
Yeah.
The details are so sordid that people either look away or they just focus on the celebrity gossip part.
Because it's easier to digest.
It is. It's much easier than the alternative.
Exactly. But then I sat down with the source material we're using today, this document. It's called The Epstein Mystery: The Network, the Money, and the Silence. And, well, I feel like I've been looking at an optical illusion my whole life, and I finally just saw the hidden image. I realized I didn't know this story at all. I knew the cover story.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The cover story versus let's call it the operational reality.
Yeah.
Usually when you discuss Jeffrey Epstein, the conversation gets really loud, really fast. People start shouting about political parties or flight logs or who knew who.
Right.
But for this deep dive, we're going to do something different. We're turning the volume down on the gossip and turning the volume way up on the mechanics.
We're looking at the machinery behind the man. Yeah. And our document starts with this central paradox that, frankly, I was a little embarrassed I hadn't really stopped to consider before. It's basically a resume question.
It's the paradox that breaks the entire narrative.
Right. So let's just look at the stats for a second. Jeffrey Epstein. College dropout, no degree, no pedigree. He teaches math at a prep school for a hot minute, gets fired.
For poor performance, no less.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, you fast forward just a few years, and this guy is somehow the primary financial advisor to billionaires, to presidents, and to royals.
It just doesn't track. I mean, in almost any other industry, maybe you can fake it till you make it, but in high finance, in that world, managing billions for the global elite, that career path is, it's functionally impossible. You don't just stumble into managing the Wexner fortune without a paper trail, without a history.
You need credentials.
Yeah.
You usually need to have gone to Wharton or logged 20 years at Goldman Sachs. You don't just walk in off the street.
Unless financial advisor isn't your actual job, unless it's your cover.
Okay.
And this document argues that while the world is busy focusing on the crimes, we should be focusing on the shadow network.
The shadow network. It sounds like the title of a Jason Bourne movie.
It sounds dramatic, but in this context, it's a very practical, almost logistical term. It's the infrastructure that let him operate in plain sight for so long.
Okay.
The source suggests Epstein wasn't just a lone criminal, he was a structural anomaly. And when you see an anomaly like that in finance or geopolitics, something that basically defies gravity, it usually means there's a hidden support system holding it up.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're mapping out that support system. Not the tabloid stuff, but the logistics. We've got three main pillars to get through. The money that shouldn't exist, the intelligence connections that look terrifyingly professional, and the suicide that, according to this text, defies the laws of probability.
Exactly. And I think we should be clear. The source material treats these not as wild theories, but as data points that just don't fit the official curve. We're here to analyze the patterns.
All right, let's start with pillar one then. The financial phantom.
The financial phantom. It's a fitting name.
Yeah, because this is the part that always confused me. The story Epstein told everyone, the brand he built, was that he was some kind of financial wizard.
A master of the universe.
Right. He manages money for the top 0.01%. He's wildly successful, and he's so exclusive he won't even take your money unless you have $1 billion.
That was the pitch. I'm too rich to care about your money. It's a classic sales tactic. It creates demand. But here's where our source material just pulls the rug out.
Okay.
When you are a billionaire money manager, you cannot be invisible. It is impossible to manage that much capital without leaving footprints everywhere.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. He was a private guy. Maybe he just kept his trades quiet. Used offshore accounts.
You can hide the profits, maybe. You can try to hide the clients, but you cannot hide the market activity.
Right.
If you're managing billions, you are moving markets. You're making huge trades. You have SEC filings. You have tons of correspondence with prime brokers, the big banks executing the trades. You have compliance audits. It's a mountain of paperwork.
It's like a whale jumping in a swimming pool. You can't claim you jumped in but didn't make any waves.
That's a perfect analogy. But when financial experts and forensic accountants actually looked at Epstein's known accounts, they found a void.
A void. Like zero.
A near total lack of a paper trail for any actual trades. The source calls him a financial anomaly. He claimed to manage billions, but aside from one major client, Leslie Wexner, the founder of The Limited.
The lingerie guy?
Right. Aside from him, there's almost no evidence of other legitimate clients trusting him with that kind of capital.
Wait, hold on. I want to pause on that because that is huge. If he basically had one real client and he wasn't really trading stocks for anyone else, how was he paying for the lifestyle?
That's the billion-dollar question.
We're talking private jets, the island, that townhouse in Manhattan that was the largest private home in the city. That's a burn rate of tens of millions a year.
So if you aren't generating that kind of yield through the stock market, where is that liquidity coming from? This is where the source pivots to a theory that just completely recontextualizes his whole business model.
Which is?
It suggests he wasn't an investor, he was an extractor.
An extractor. Okay, explain that.
Think about his black book. You know, that famous contact list everyone was obsessed with?
Yeah, the Rolodex. I always just assumed that was an ego project, you know? Look at me, I know Trump, I know Clinton, I know Prince Andrew. Social climbing.
That's how it was presented, yeah. Social climber's trophy. But if you look at it through the lens of this source, they call the black book an insurance policy.
An insurance policy.
Think about the product he was selling. If you're a real financial advisor, your product is yield. You make me money, I pay you a fee. Simple.
Okay.
But if you are what this source suggests Epstein was, your product is silence.
Ah. So the theory is, I have dirt on you, so you invest with me.
Or you pay him enormous consulting fees. Or you give him access to deals he has no business being in. Or you introduce him to other powerful people who he can then target.
So the wealth wasn't the result of brilliant stock picks.
The wealth was the byproduct of leverage.
That actually solves the math problem. You don't need a trading floor or a team of quants to run a blackmail operation. You just need a safe.
And you need access. Which brings us right back to that resume paradox. How does a college dropout get in the room with presidents? Well, maybe financial advisor was just the cover story.
Because nobody questions the rich guy in the suit standing in the corner.
Exactly. If you say you're a billionaire, people just assume you belong there. It flips the whole script. He wasn't a billionaire who happened to do bad things.
The bad things were the business model.
Correct. And that business model required infrastructure. You can't run a global blackmail operation with just a notebook. Which leads us directly to the second key mystery in the text, the intelligence connection.
Okay, this is the part where I started reading, and I had to double check I wasn't reading a spy novel script. We're talking about honey traps.
We are. And we should define that term carefully because I think pop culture uses it pretty loosely.
Right. It's not just a fling.
No, not at all. In intelligence circles, and the source explicitly mentions agencies like the CIA or Mossad as comparisons, a honey trap is a very specific type of tradecraft.
Okay.
It involves systematically placing a target in a compromising sexual or romantic situation, documenting it meticulously, and then using that documentation to compromise the target, to own them.
Owning them. That's a terrifying phrase when you're talking about world leaders.
Now, let's look at the physical evidence the source highlights. Epstein's properties. The New York townhouse, the Palm Beach estate, the island. We're not just speculating here, we're looking at the actual layout.
The source mentions the wiring.
It was more than specific, it was industrial. And the document points to a detail that I find absolutely chilling. Every single room was wired with surveillance equipment.
Every room. Pinhole cameras, hidden microphones, all of it.
All of it.
See, that's the part that always stuck out to me. I've heard people dismiss it like, oh, he was just a paranoid billionaire or he was a voyeur. But does a voyeur need, server racks full of hard drives?
That's the exact question the source poses. Why would a financier need more surveillance than a bank?
Right.
If you're just a money manager, or even if you're just engaging in sordid, illegal behavior, usually you want less evidence, not more. You want privacy. You want plausible deniability.
Exactly. If I'm committing a felony, I'm not filming it in 4K and then cataloging it. Unless
the recording is the whole point. Unless the act itself is just the bait and the tape is the hook.
Wow.
The source actually quotes former intelligence officers who looked at this setup, the complexity, the storage, and they said, this isn't a rich guy's house, this is a trap.
So the theory is that this was all to gather dirt on the world's most powerful people. The ones from the intro. Presidents, royals, scientists.
To control them. And this completely shifts our understanding of Epstein. The narrative goes from pervert with an island to operative with a mission.
Because if you control the people who control the money and the laws,
you are more powerful than any president.
So,
right.
Was he working for himself or was he working for someone else? The source brings up state actors.
It makes the comparison, yes. It says the methodology was identical to state-sponsored intelligence operations. The sheer scale of it, the cost of the surveillance, the complexity, it suggests a level of sophistication that goes way beyond a single guy with a camcorder. It implies there was a client.
It's the difference between a hobbyist and a professional. And if you're running an operation that threatens the most powerful people on Earth, well, that makes you a pretty massive liability if you ever get caught.
Which brings us to key mystery number 3, the end. The suicide.
The suicide narrative, as the source calls it. Now look, Epstein didn't kill himself is basically a cultural catchphrase at this point. It's a meme.
It is.
But the source argues that it's more than a meme. It calls the official story a logical deduction of the impossible.
It's a deduction based on probability. Let's just stack up the failures listed in the text. We're talking about the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a high-security federal facility.
Right. It's designed architecturally and operationally to keep people alive and inside.
And yet, on that one night, everything broke.
Everything.
First, the technology. The source notes that 2 different cameras monitoring his cell area malfunctioned simultaneously.
2, at the exact same time.
Yes. In a facility where surveillance is the #1 job, if one camera fails, it's a maintenance issue. If 2 fail, covering the same high-value target at the exact moment of his death, statistically, that's a massive anomaly.
And then you have the guards, the human element.
They didn't just miss a check, they fell asleep. And then, crucially, the logs were falsified to cover it up.
But the part that really gets me is the suicide watch. He had allegedly tried to hurt himself just weeks earlier, right?
Correct. And despite being the most high-profile prisoner in the entire country, he was taken off suicide watch just days before his death.
That's the part that just defies all logic. If you are the warden of that facility, you don't take your eyes off this guy for a single second. His life is the evidence.
It defies standard protocol. But the source goes even deeper than just the procedural failures. It points to the forensic evidence, the actual pathology report.
The neck fractures. I remember reading about the hyoid bone.
Specifically, the breaking of the hyoid bone. Now, we have to be precise here. Can a hyoid bone break in a hanging? Yes, it's possible, especially in older individuals.
Okay.
However, the source notes that these specific fractures are statistically much more common in homicidal strangulation.
So wait, let's stack this up. You have a bone fracture that looks more like strangulation. You have guards who fell asleep. You have cameras that just happen to turn off. And you have the most important prisoner in the world taken off suicide watch against all common sense.
Any one of those things on its own is a major failure, all of them happening at once. The source argues that to accept the official story, you have to suspend logic. It suggests the probability of all these safety mechanisms failing by accident all at the same time is basically 0.
It's like if you flip a coin and it lands on its edge once, that's a fluke. If it lands on its edge 5 times in a row.
The coin is weighted, or someone is holding the coin. And that's what this text is driving at. The skepticism around his death isn't born from some wild fantasy. It's born from recognizing that systems don't fail this consistently, this conveniently.
It really paints a picture of cleanup operation. You know, like, okay, the asset is burned, show's over, time to strike the set.
But here's where it gets really, well, terrifying. The source concludes that the show isn't over.
Because of the missing tapes.
Exactly. This is the conclusion section of our source material. We talked about that industrial-grade surveillance system. We talked about the honey trap. If that theory holds true, if the houses were all wired,
Recordings exist.
hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and yet, where are they? We know the FBI seized hard drives and raided his safe, but the source explicitly mentions the missing tapes.
And if those tapes exist, that means the leverage still exists.
Yes. And in this world, leverage is a physical asset. It's a currency. It doesn't just evaporate because the person who collected it dies. If anything, it becomes more valuable.
That is a very scary thought. It means there's a vault somewhere or a cloud server.
The source has this one line that really stuck with me. It says, the scary part isn't that he died, it's that the system he built might still be active.
Oof. Let that sink in for a second. The system might still be active.
Think about it. We've seen a partial list of names from the flight logs and the unsealed documents. We see names of princes and politicians. But if the black book was an insurance policy and the tapes were the collateral, who inherited that policy?
Not the money estate, the information estate.
Correct. Someone, somewhere, might currently be holding the remote to that surveillance system. or at least holding the hard drives that came from it.
So if we play this out, if a politician acts strangely tomorrow, or a billionaire makes a decision that goes completely against their own business interests,
You have to ask yourself, are they making that choice, or is the shadow network making it for them?
it basically means that Epstein wasn't the head of the snake. He was just the face of the operation.
He was the operator, but operators can be replaced. The infrastructure, the network of silence, the flow of money, the demand for this kind of material, that structure is still intact.
It's fascinating because it takes the story away from being about one bad man and turns it into a story about one bad system.
And systems are much, much harder to kill than individuals.
This has been pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But necessary, I think. We really needed to peel back these layers.
Absolutely. It's important to look at the mechanics, not just the drama. Once you understand the mechanics, the news starts to look very different.
So let's just recap what we found in this deep dive. We started with a college dropout who likely didn't trade stocks but traded secrets.
Right. The financial phantom.
Then we have a man who ran a surveillance operation that mimicked state intelligence agencies, complete with a wired island and honey trap protocols.
Yes. The intelligence connection.
And a man who died under circumstances that defy statistical probability and forensic logic.
A logical deduction of the impossible.
And finally, this lingering threat that the tapes, all that leverage, are still out there somewhere.
And being used by someone.
You know, usually we try to wrap these deep dives up with a nice, tidy takeaway, something you can use in a dinner party. But this is something to keep you up at night.
It should, because it implies the full truth hasn't come out yet. We've maybe seen the trailer, but we definitely haven't seen the whole movie.
It really makes you wonder about the last word in the title of the document. The network, the money, and the silence. That silence might be the loudest part of the whole story.
It usually is.
So here's the question I want to leave you with. We talked about the Black Book being an insurance policy. When a policyholder dies, the beneficiary gets paid.
That is the critical question.
If the Black Book was insurance, who inherited the policy? And maybe more importantly, who is holding the remote to that surveillance system right now? Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Stay curious.